What's up, Lover Researchers? It's Kevin. Welcome back to another video, and today I'm with a special guest, Jason Zhang. He's the head of product at StubHub. I've worked with him for a couple months. He's a great guy. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Kevin, for having me on.
Yeah, excited to have you in here. I think a lot of viewers would love to hear from a product manager because we work really closely with UER and user experience researchers all the time.
Yep.
Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and tell me what you like to do and what you do right now?
Sure. So how about I give you a little bit of background about me first. Grew up in the Midwest, Indiana, and Michigan. Went to school at the University of Michigan, go Blue. Studied engineering there. Then got my first job working for what many engineers do when they graduate from University of Michigan. They work for a car company. So I worked for Chrysler for the first 2 years of my career. Right around the time of the previous financial bailout that the government had to come in and go through. So that was a great experience for me. Learned a lot. It was a great opportunity to be able to work at a really big company. Also, they paid for me to get my master's in engineering at the same time. So it was a really interesting program. Also got the opportunity from there to, in many instances that people are dealing with right now, take a leave of absence if necessary. So they actually offered, instead of laying people off, they actually offered everybody the opportunity to take $50,000 in a free car. Literally, that was the offer: $50,000 in a free car.
Wow. What car did you get?
Instead of actually taking a layoff. So it was interesting because I think my friends and I, we kind of alluded to, is like we were like probably the last people they were going to lay off. We were right out of school. We were super cheap, and they probably didn't want us to leave. But it was just too attractive to take a free car and drive across the country. So I did, and from there moved out to California, to San Mateo. Worked at a consulting company for a couple years, and then went from there into tech. I got my start. I founded my own company actually first. It's a company called Homelight. It helps people find real estate agents using historical data. So it consolidates a lot of data from different areas and basically tells you that real estate agent Bob is great at selling houses above $2 million in Nob Hill, but he's not that great in Soma because he hasn't actually worked with Soma Soma homes very often. So that's something that wasn't available before. My co-founder and I, we created that, and it was a really great experience. It's actually still going.
Oh wow!
It's done well. It's raised multiple rounds, and it's still popping up all the time. I think might have even like joked with people because randomly sometimes when we have the TVs on at StubHub, Homelight commercials just randomly come on. I was like, oh, hey, that's the company I founded. So that was great. After that, worked for various other startups, and eventually found my way to StubHub about probably 2 years ago. So from there, been at StubHub now for close to running on 2 years.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. And how did you go from engineering into what you do now, which is product management?
Yeah. So I think an engineering degree, one of the biggest things that it does is it really helps form how you problem solve. I think most everything starts with a scientific method. Most everything there from a scientific method starts with a hypothesis. Most hypotheses are not necessarily going to work, but the best way to be able to get to a final resolution is to be able to try multiple things and be able to have good methodology, good metrics, and good data that you're using to know whether or not something worked. And be able to like revolve pretty fast around that, right? So that's the baseline of what engineering, science, anything basically teaches you. And those are all skills that I think product managers, designers, UER, like those are things that they very, very much consolidated onto, right? I think that's where it kind of revolved into pretty seamlessly for me. And then being able to mesh that together with what I think product managers do at most companies. They kind of mesh together what customer value is with what business value is, and together with how feasible something is to build with the teams that they're working with, right? So it's being able to roll those things together and being able to push something forward into getting it forward into people's hands more frequently.
Yeah, you answered my next question, which is, what does a product manager do?
Yeah, that's the reason why you gave me these questions beforehand, so I could get one, right, Kevin?
Yeah, he knows. He can tell the future.
The job is not to make the decisions. The job is to be able to use the information that you have to be able to make decisions that are building towards the customers that you're going towards, right? And I think sometimes you can get lost in it. Sometimes it can feel like the role of a product manager is this all powerful, hey, this person gets to make all the calls. It's not that, right? If the product manager is making all the calls with no input from other people, they apparently will build their favorite product in the world that no one else will ever want to use.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that some viewers have asked is, who does user experience researchers work with? And we work with a lot of people cross-functionally, marketing, design, engineering sometimes, and most importantly, I would say product managers. So how do product managers and researchers typically collaborate? And I mean, I can have some input as well, but I'd like to get your perspective.
I think user research is one of the most critical parts of the product development process, right? So I mentioned before, what I think product managers do at most companies are put together customer value, business value, and together with like feasibility, right? And one of the biggest pitfalls that you can get into with trying to determine customer value is not talking to the customer and being able to actually think that the value that you think a customer would want is the actual value that people that actually use your product on a day-to-day basis want to have, right? And so I think that's where user research is absolutely critical to be able to determine true customer value and actually true fit to what you're trying to build. Because you get to be able to see and talk to people about that before you start investing the time and resources into actually building something, right? Even before you even do a lot of feasibility analysis. And I think that's some of the best things that you can be able to get as a product managers can be able to get while working with user researchers, is being able to get that sense early on because it helps them frame what to be able to focus on, what to be able to gravitate towards, and what are things that you should actually spend an inordinate amount of time on, and what are things that even though it might seem like a good idea internally to the business, it doesn't resonate nearly as well with customers themselves.
Yeah, totally. Like you said, perfectly. You put it perfectly. We come up with these customer values, the team, your product management team, and our job is to separate the assumptions from the truth. And some of the hypotheses are maybe based on assumption, but that's why they're hypothesis. And that's why we go out and test it and find out, hey, is this the right way, the right area we should be looking into? Are these the right questions? Are these the right problems to be solving? Yeah, so that's our collaborations.
You know, there's a lot of things too, right? That you can test in user research that customers really gravitate to as well. But they don't necessarily have the right business value, or they have too much of a negative business value that it's not something that you can actually be able to deeply pursue as a company, right? Or be able to deeply pursue with like the metrics and what you have as initiatives for that year, right? I think that's also really important to be able to kind of phase together. Is when you're framing together what you're researching, there are things that there should be a lot of hypotheses you go after, right? And there's potentially a lot of hypotheses that test very well with customers that you have to put together with what the business value could actually be, and be able to then say, hey, is that something that we want to be able to push forward with into the next phase of product development? Right?
Yeah, and that comes a lot of testing, concept testing, and validation. We have to balance what's best sometimes for the business and the user.
There are some things that if a customer actually used more would actually harm the business more. Those are some of the things that I think become some sticking points with how you actually discuss. I think we've had multiple conversations around, there are some things around how fees, how pricing, how various different things like essentially work together. Those are more difficult to be able to kind of peel apart because there's tons of value from a customer perspective, but there's actually potentially negative value from a company perspective, right?
Another question I have for you is, what can product managers expect from user researchers?
Yeah, they should be able to talk pretty early, and they should be able to talk on even footing on what is the expected outcome of what you want to be able to get. Not what you want to see, but how you want to be able to test it, right? What are the type of questions, what are the type of motivations you're trying to suss out, right? Without trying to push an outcome that is not necessarily going to be correct, right? So I think that's where that collaboration is really, really important, to have that discussion really early on. Because a product manager will have in their head somewhere, it's like, hey, I need this research to be able to push this feature forward and be able to get the green light. And a researcher should hopefully be able to have the right conversational points to essentially say, hey, let's take half a step back and say, what are the things that you want to be able to see, not just about this feature, but about this concept as a whole? And can these things essentially be able to like fill in with not just the route that you're trying to see go down, you're trying to go down, but actually a potentially better route that you might not have seen, right? And so you don't get into, again, back into the aspect of self-fulfilling prophecies, right?
Exactly.
And you're actually getting customer value, as opposed to product manager feature baked value that you can essentially rig the game. So the questions are going to come back in your favor, right? Yeah.
And sometimes that, as a user researcher, we should be trained to kind of identify, is this a solution first approach? If it is, like you said, let's take a step back and understand, what do we actually want to get out of this, and maybe not shoot down the concept or feature right away. It could be a really exciting idea, but let's think about it first. What should the users get out of it? What's the business value here? User researchers should just ask why. Talk early and often. And that goes off to my, kickoff meeting video. Tell me a little bit about the background. Where did this come from? What is it that you want to learn? What are some research questions? And what do we expect to see afterwards? And then that way we can kind of approach the problem, not from a solution first, but more of a needs first.
Yes. Yeah.
Actually, I had a follow-up question. When user research come out with insights or recommendations, do you sometimes expect the user researcher to have more of a say in terms of like, we should do this, or should they be neutral in their recommendations?
I think user researchers, just like designers, just like engineers, just like anybody that's part of that product development process, should have opinions. They should have opinions, and those opinions should be debated. Those opinions should be discussed. And people should be able to take them, and the people should be able to conceptualize them, and people should be able to have a active discussion around it, right? No idea is a bad idea, because even the worst ideas sometimes will work itself out, right? People should be able to bring in their different walks of life and be able to bring in their different modes of expertise and effectively have a good discussion around it, right? I think the best decisions are always made, and the best products are always built from teams and people that are connected very, very closely to what the customers are trying to build towards. And people need to be able to be open in those conversations, right?
Yeah, totally agree. I asked because I've received a couple of questions and comments from some viewers. As researchers, they're like, should we be neutral, just present data and let people make decisions, or should we have an opinion? So I totally agree with you that we're not just robot scientists, researchers, that we have opinions. And some of the times as user researchers, we're pretty close to the user insights. Like if we're not the closest to understanding the users.
One big key around that, right? If you're working with a group of people, and yes, everybody does have all their own insights and all their own recommendations. People need to cultivate an environment that people can discuss, right?
Yes.
The decision is made, and so we're going into a route, right? And however that decision was made, that's not necessarily the biggest and most important thing. Once the decision is made, people need to go towards that decision. And one of the most defeatist things that you can do is someone not liking that decision and actively trying to figure out ways to get that decision to be undone, right? To be winded back. And basically what you end up doing is trying to fight your own team to be able to have your opinion more fully voiced, right? So I think that's where like the mix comes in. Definitely, for sure. Everybody's opinion needs to be heard. Everybody's opinion should be heard. But once a decision is made, people need to move forward with that decision together as a team. Because if you're not going to get anything done. right?
Yeah.
And it's not going to be because it wasn't the right decision in the first place. It's going to be because the team wasn't aligned on it, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, maybe there are some environments that are just not conducive to people feeling safe to express their opinions. So first have that culture, and then you'll be able to express your opinions like that.
Yeah, and it's and to the aspiring user researchers out there, not every single culture will necessarily be the most inviting to opinions either. So I think you also have to play that accordingly to how you think and feel within your own organization itself, right?
Absolutely. Cool. My next question is, maybe it's something I can kind of talk to, but what can user researchers expect from PMs?
What can user research expect from PMs? I would hope that user researchers will get a good collaborative PM. If they are in the kickoff meeting, maybe a little bit solution-led, we can very easily turn their thinking into becoming more hypothesis. I think that's the base expectation that user researchers should have for PMs. Is they might walk into that meeting with a certain hat on, but they should be able to pretty quickly change that hat to be able to then remember that what their ultimate focus is learning what customers want, not trying to get that widget built so they can be able to check off a box for you, right?
Totally. That's a great point. I can add on, like, from a tactile standpoint, just every day I expect constant collaboration, including us into kind of talks with decision makers, especially when I really appreciate how one of our studies we did together, we presented the ideas together. So I really like that. And sometimes, I've worked with PMs who didn't really have a clear sense on what direction to take a product, which is totally fine. And sometimes there's no clear solutions to problems, but just be very communicative in saying, hey, these are some open questions still. Let's do more research around this area, or how can we get involved? I like it when PMs get involved and into the research and not just go like, here's a project, go for it. So always kind of working together so that when I present the research, nothing should be a surprise.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I would hope that PMs are not just there for, I want to have UER done on this, and I'm now expecting the results, Kevin, please provide them to me, right?
Yeah.
It should be a conversation about, what are you asking about? How are we talking about this? What are the goals for this? What are other things to be able to look out for? What are things that, hey, if they go down this route, that's maybe a good route for you to continue down to be able to kind of suss things out that we haven't thought about before. If the expectation is, hey, here you go, I went to your kickoff meeting, now, in 10 days, give me a report out so I can go share it with my boss and get sign off for this project. I don't think that's a good collaboration. I don't think that's a good relationship. I don't think that's a good collaboration. And nor do I think I don't think good user research comes out of that, right? I think it comes back to you're going to get what you asked for. You're going to get a self-fulfilled prophecy. And if you build too many things that are just a self-fulfilled prophecy from an internal product team, what you're going to end up building is the most useful thing for 40 people, not for 4 million people.
Cool. Jason, that was awesome. Thank you so much for your time. You're a treasure trove of insights, and I'm sure this video on how UX researchers and PMs collaborate will be super valuable for the viewers.
Thanks, Kevin, for inviting me on. It was great. It was a fun conversation. Everybody stay safe. Everybody listen to your local leaders. And we'll all get through this. It's a very, very unique time. So
totally. Words of wisdom from Jason. Thank you again, Jason. Thanks all for watching. Mad love. Peace.